And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 94th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, June 25th, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. You can catch our live broadcast Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. on our YouTube page or our website. If you miss us for the live broadcast, you can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts, so you can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ. Subscribe and turn the bell on. All of our information is in our website, indianahq.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. On the docket for tonight, we're going to take an in-depth look at the junior class for both the football and basketball programs. Just like our senior class edition, we will go through the list of players that will have an impact on both programs this year and what we should expect from them. But before we do that, we will talk about Romeo Langford getting drafted to the Boston Celtics. But before we get into that, here with me tonight, it's a two-man show this evening as Nathan is away. So Matt and I are here to break things down tonight. How are you doing tonight, Matt?
Hey guys, what's up? I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Noah? Nobody ever asks you how you're doing.
That's
They
true.
just ask us how
That's
we're doing.
true. So, yeah, no one ever does ask me how I'm doing. I'm doing great. Thank you for being the first person on our 94th episode to ask how I was doing.
Hey, whoa.
There's a first time for everything. But as we talked about, and everyone obviously knows, Romeo Langford was drafted 14th overall, the last selection in the lottery in the NBA draft this past Thursday evening. He was drafted on the Celtics along with former Tennessee power forward Grant Williams, former Purdue player Carson Edwards, and former point guard from LSU Tremont Waters. So we are waiting for the pick to come in. You see the cameras start to go over to Romeo, Matt, and you see that the commish, Adam Silver, comes over to announce that Romeo Langford is going to the Boston Celtics. What were your immediate thoughts going in your head?
Well, see, I had it ruined for me on Twitter because I follow Woj, and so it was just automatically ruined for me.
Okay, so when you saw the Woj bomb, what were your thoughts?
I saw the Woj bomb. When I saw the Woj bomb, I went, the Celtics? I was like, okay, that shooting guard was not what they needed. They did not need a ball dominant two guard. That's not what they needed. But they got Romeo. So that was my first reaction. And then the more I've thought about it, the more it still makes no sense to me why they picked him. And I love Romeo as a player, but Romeo's got to take time to develop his jump shot. Boston's a team that is like, either we're going to make the playoffs next year or we're just going to trade everybody and tank. And Romeo is one of those players where it's like, if you're going to trade everybody and tank, Romeo is the player to do it with, because he's going to take some time to, get used to the NBA. He's going to need some time to grow as a player and as a human being because he's so young and coming into a league that's very hard and very tough and brutal on young players. Like, it's not often that you have a Trae Young who can come in and look like he belongs in the NBA. But even he had struggles, like Trae Young, who was runner-up in the Rookie of the Year. It was last night for the NBA awards, but he was runner-up. But for the first couple of months, he looked very shaky. People are like, well, I don't know. Maybe the Mavs won the Luka Trae Young trade. And then towards the end of the year, he finally got his footing. That's rare. It usually takes like rookies and first-year guys and people coming out of college like 2 to 3 years to really get used to the NBA, really get used to the speed, the athleticism, and just the pure basketball knowledge needed to be a great NBA player. So while I think Romeo is going to be a fantastic NBA player, and I believe that Romeo is going to exceed people's expectations, because I've seen some people slandering him, I don't think this is the greatest fit for him, just because I feel like he needed a team where they were going to develop him and only him and not other people around him as well. So I just don't really like the fit in Boston.
I wish Nathan was here because we like to try and obviously get as many differing opinions as possible. But I was more on the fence, just like you were. I thought first, I was glad that, of course, that he was picked. He was picked in the lottery, and that was the immediate reaction of Romeo Langford getting drafted where he did, being able to hopefully start to be able to prove people wrong, at least some of the IU fan base, that he didn't live up to expectations and all of that. So I was glad to see him drafted. But then again, like you, when I took a step back and started to think about it more, I was questioning a lot of the same things you were. Because before the draft, the Celtics knew that first, Kyrie Irving, it's been no secret, almost for sure is leaving Boston. So that's a huge problem that they have to try and fill and trying to address. It's not the same position. It's a point guard, but it just has a big question mark for the future of the Celtics. Then it was what was it, a couple days or something like that before that the whispers and everything that Al Horford was probably not going to come back. It was close, but it was still before the draft. And that's two out of the three, the quote unquote big three that they have that are now leaving. So like you said, are they just going to go full rebuild mode with having Gordon Hayward as the rock and trying to develop a lot of these younger players? Because I liked exactly what you said. They still have a lot of players to develop, and I don't think their young players that they thought were going to be the superstar picks that they got from the Nets have developed like they've wanted to just yet. They still want Jaylen Brown. Who else am I looking at here? Jason Tatum, some of those guys to develop into better
Gordon
players.
Hayward coming back from his injury.
Exactly.
Like these are players, these are wings. These are players that play on the wing and that will take minutes away from Romeo. You have a former NBA All-Star, Gordon Hayward, somebody who's coming back from injury, and I'm sure after having a more playing time this year under his belt again, he will be a little bit better than he was this year next year. You have Jason Tatum, who's developing into probably a perennial all-star. You have Jaylen Brown, who knows what he's going to be, but he's a promising young player as well. And then you have to fit Romeo into that rotation somehow. I don't think it was the greatest fit for him. Look, if they like him a lot, great. Like, that's awesome. I love it. If they're going to like focus on him and develop him, I'll eat my words. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. But they have so many other players, so many other young players, so many other assets that they're trying to develop at the same time. It's like, I don't know if Romeo's going to get enough individual attention that he needs. So I don't know.
Even adding to not just developing the young players, but replacing Kyrie and replacing Al Horford is going to take some time, because even if they do what Terry Rozier really wanted in the first place, was basically to him to get the money from Boston to move up to the starting position. He's still not officially used to that for 82 games plus the playoffs. Yeah. And even though he had that one good stretch I guess the 2018 playoffs, that he had the good stretch in the playoffs when Kyrie was out, but it's still a different role to have the longevity that he has. So they have to replace the point guard. They have to replace the center, which is a big question mark, honestly, because they don't have too many big guys that can do that center role that they've been using the past few years with Al Horford. Then you've got those young players, and then let's just go into the shooting guard position, because I think even the Celtics are going to try and use him as a shooting guard, not 100%, but basically a shooting guard. So of course the number 2 on paper that they've been using most of the time is Jaylen Brown. The point guard was Kyrie. So Jaylen Brown is definitely going to get the start over Romeo, even at the beginning of the year. I don't even think Romeo believes that he jumped Jaylen Brown at the very beginning. But behind him, they haven't. They have technically a couple shooting guards, but they've Marcus Smart is officially a point guard, but he's kind of come off the bench as that 2 guard. And Marcus Smart has been, at least from the rumors and whispers, that that's a guy that the Celtics want to keep. So there's a potential that Romeo could be 3rd on the depth chart for shooting guard coming off of the bench. Now, we were talking about this in the back channels, but where do you even see Romeo coming off of the bench? And I know a lot of this in a week to 2 weeks, a lot of these questions will start to get some of these questions answered, but how far do you think off the bench is Romeo going to be? He's going to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th man off the bench. What were your thoughts originally when you were starting to look at some of the depth chart with the Celtics?
I think he'll probably be the 7th guy off the bench. I think they'll probably have a short leash on whoever is playing the two this year, whether it's Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. It's most likely Jaylen Brown, like they played him last year. But they'll probably have a short leash on him and bring him in along with Marcus Smart and put Marcus at the point guard position, especially if they don't get somebody like Kemba Walker, who's been rumored that Boston is interested in. But, they might not even pay – this is speculation, but they might not even pay Terry Rozier the money, and they might just give Marcus Smart the starting position and then bring Carson Edwards off the bench. Mr. Purdue, just drafted by them. That is an option for them as well. So it's weird. Look, we could talk all day about NBA lineups because the NBA is crazy where you have literally 13 guys that know how to play basketball, and you could fit them in all over the place. I just personally don't like this fit, but I will end on a positive note for Romeo. He gets to work with Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is a fantastic NBA coach, even though some ridiculous Boston fans give him crap for what he's had to put up with a diva of a point guard and Kyrie and injuries to Gordon Hayward, almost ruining his career, and just so many different pieces he has to put together. I do believe if there is a positive for Romeo going to Boston, it's working with him as a head coach and being able to work with his staff and being able to develop under them. Now, if they give him enough attention, that's enough individual attention, and make sure that he's being okay, because he is not the focal point of the team.
Mm-hmm.
But great for IU basketball that he goes in the lottery, though.
Yeah.
And the people that went, oh my gosh, he was ranked 6th in high school, and he goes 14th. Oh my God, what did we do to him? We ruined him. He was like the 6th freshman picked. So if you look at his class, he was ranked 6th in the class. That doesn't mean he was ranked 6th in all college basketball players.
Let alone Europe leagues too.
Right, exactly. There's European players. There wasn't. I don't think there was a European player taken this year.
No, I don't think so, or at least it was close to him. But I think Romeo got him all out.
Yeah.
Bad journalism, us not remembering it off the top of our heads.
I think he was picked 18th.
Yeah.
But anyways,
your Brad Stevens point was great because Coach Brian Tonsoni in the chatting with us, he was talking about the one thing as we were going on through this, couple comments was Brad Stevens is going to be great for Romeo. And I was like, I'm going to get to that. That was a good point. And then you stole Brian and I's.
I'm sorry. I'm not looking at chat.
I know that's okay.
I can't take the steal credit, but
that just proves our point more that I think Romeo going to a coach like Brad Stevens, one of the cream of the crop coaches in the NBA right now, especially with some of the talent that like you said, the position, the job he's been in, I think that's a great position for Romeo to be in. Now, I think what you and I were hesitating on was where does Romeo fit in the current Celtics roster,
yes,
which I think is a question that the Celtics have to figure out themselves over the next couple of years. So long-term wise, I think Romeo has a great shot at finding his place within the NBA. Now, of course, if he's going to eventually be a starter, I think it's going to be interesting where he and Jaylen Brown will eventually potentially clash for a starting role. But like you said, like Coach was saying, long-term, after the next few years, as he starts to develop, as maybe he gets more attention than he might get this year, then I think he's actually going to be that is a great spot for him to be coached under Brad Stevens. And if he goes most of his rookie contract or all of his rookie contract and then goes to another team, I think that's still a good coach for him to get his footing under to start his NBA career with. Maybe he doesn't make as big of a splash as we all wanted to within the next 4 to 5 years, depending on contracts and stuff. But after that, I think he's going to start to be able to show people what he can do. And remember, he's been playing with a torn ligament in his shooting hand.
Right.
So,
right. My original disagreement with the pick and why I was confused is because I don't see the playing time for him
on this roster.
On this roster, I like another positive that just epiphany. is I really like the ability for him to go up against the likes of Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Gordon Hayward in practice. I think that's great for his development. Working with Brad Stevens and being able to sit there and look at practice tape and be like, what did I do against a guy like Jason Tatum, who is one of the better young players in the league and one of the most ridiculously gifted forwards, offensive forwards in the league, and go, okay, when you're defending him, this is what you do. This is what you did wrong. Like that stuff, especially working with a basketball genius in Brad Stevens, is going to benefit Romeo so much. He's going to be such a better defensive player because of Celtics practices, because the players that they have, those wing players, are great. But he's got to get playing time to develop as a player. You got to get some real minutes, and that's the issue with this roster.
Yeah. So, and again, 2 weeks, we have the same conversation. Like we could talk about this again and it'd be very different just because free agency in a week, some of it will be answered, but really 2 weeks to see where some of those more role players get slotted into as free agency for the NBA gets started in just under a week. So we'll have to see where the Celtics officially go with everything. But just after that, where we could potentially see Romeo start to get his first NBA minutes, as we were just talking about, the Summer League. The Celtics are going to be in Las Vegas the whole time because they have those couple of other spots that a few teams will play for. Most of them play in Las Vegas. The Celtics are a team that usually plays in Las Vegas 100% of the time. Their first Summer League game is against the Sixers on July 6th, Cavaliers on July 8th, Nuggets on July 9th, Grizzlies on July 11th. I have the times, but you'll just forget them if I were to give them to you randomly now. But the good news is all of those games, those 4 games before the tournament, are on ESPN or ESPN2. So they're games that we can watch and see Romeo potentially play, because it was put out today when Romeo got to Boston and he got to meet with the media and everything. They kind of talked about, hey, is your hand going to be okay? Are you going to be able to play for Summer League? It's not official. It's not 100% yes, but it's not 100% no. It's a big question mark. I could speculate. I could give my opinion, but I'm not a doctor. I don't know where he is. He's cleared to play. He's cleared to start shooting, but I don't know if the Celtics are going to say, hey, why don't you sit out this just so we know that you're going to be okay for even more things like team training camp, or, hey, why don't we see what you got? So that's going to be a big question mark from here on out. After that, more or less in the Summer League, if you don't know too much about the NBA Summer League, most of the teams make the tournament. They just want to make it a nice round 28 number so that they can go down, and the NBA is 30 teams. So really it's just 2 teams that don't make it. So usually we're going to see Romeo in some sort of tournament. They'll rank them 1 to 28 and then they'll just keep going down. So it depends on how many games we could potentially see, because, hey, who knows, maybe mid-July he gets a little better, then he starts to get cleared to play, but guess we'll see. Have any comments on that?
I think I really do wish he plays in Summer League. I think it'd be fun to watch him, a backcourt of Carson Edwards and Romeo Langford. Even though Carson Edwards is a Purdue guy, I secretly always loved the way he plays basketball. It's really fun. He's a fun player to watch. So getting to pair him with Romeo is going to be fun to watch. Another IU guy going to be in Summer League for the Utah Jazz, Juwan Morgan. I know I do my transitions great. It's all the times that you make me host because you have something random to do, and then you force me to host. I've learned it. Anyway, Juwan Morgan playing at the power forward position for the Utah Jazz in the Summer League. That's going to be fun to watch. The Jazz are an interesting organization. I think he actually fits really well with the Jazz, and I like what the Jazz do with young players and players that go in the G League. And I'm sure Juwan will probably start out in the G League. He might even be on a 2-way contract, which would be ideal for him. But start out in the G League, and you've seen players like Royce O'Neal come up from the G League and play important minutes for the Jazz. So I think that's a great organization for him to be in and be around.
It's also a winning organization too. Yes. So in the terms of him not being able, I even think a 2-way contract is like his ceiling for this current year, his rookie year. That'd be a best possible scenario.
Yeah.
It's still, he's going to be around a winning organization that's been doing some of the correct things recently. And
I mean, we know what he does, right? Like Indiana fans, I think, are a little bit more educated than most basketball fans on how good of a player Juwan Morgan is.
Yeah.
And I do think if he shows out in summer league, he can earn that 2-way contract. He's got to show out, but I think it's very possible. And especially with people, talking about, look at the fourth pick of the draft, DeAndre Hunter. The Hawks traded up to pick him. DeAndre Hunter, they're talking about playing at the center, talking about playing Zion Williamson at the center position. All these guys are a little bit undersized and mobile guys. That is what Juwan Morgan is. He's a lot less mobile and athletic than Zion, and I'm not comparing him to Zion, but I'm saying,
of course, yeah,
that as a power forward, a la mid, what they call a tweener. They used to call a tweener, but a la Draymond Green. Mm-hmm. And everybody's looking for their Draymond. And so Juwan is not Draymond, but Juwan has the potential to be Draymond-esque. And so, and we've seen that as an IU fan. So, if he can show off that he has that potential, he could definitely get that 2-way contract from the Jazz.
Even if he doesn't get a 2-way contract and he shows out, I think he could still find a spot on one of the G League teams, which is the great part about the G League actually becoming a physical league and every team basically having their own more or less feeder league, their development team. There are more spots for people to get on, which is much better than it was when it was the D League. I've liked how they've the G League has made it to where there are more spots, more teams, more just exposure, more time for people to get in, which is, of course, how Yogi ended up getting up there. So I think I think he's going to be able to prove himself in Summer League. If he does great, shows what he can do, I think he can find a spot on the G League and then just wait to try and get up to the big times, the big guns, play against some of those big caliber opponents and get to that 2-way contract, find some of that. I think Juwan, if he has, it might take him a year or so, but I think he's got that. For a more recent comparison, the track he has is something like Yogi did. Try and get that 10-day contract or that 2-way contract and stuff to try and get into the league. But the Jazz, they host 4 teams before going to Las Vegas. They'll play Memphis, Cleveland, and San Antonio before heading over to play Oklahoma City, Miami, Portland, and Houston. A lot of games in the Summer League. You're guaranteed 4 or 5 games before the tournament if you make it. So the Jazz will play at their home stadium. Then they'll go to Las Vegas. As of now, I don't have the TV stuff for where the Jazz are playing. I don't think it's on necessarily yet. I saw a couple places that it's not out yet. Matt's going to check just in case, but some of the places I saw didn't have. Yeah, so TV stuff is a question mark at the moment for the Jazz. It might be if they play a big team, like maybe San Antonio might get an ESPN thing, but just keep your eyes peeled. They start July 1st, so next Monday, 6 days from when we record this podcast. So keep your eyes out when we can see Juwan do what he can do. All right, let's move on to the junior class for football and basketball. We'll go through these, some of these people somewhat quick because I know we talked, at least I plan to talk about Romeo a little less, but that's okay. I thought we got some good discussion on Romeo and Juwan in the NBA, which is what we want all IU players to eventually do. But Let's talk about the current season. So like we've been talking about with our summer program as the long hours go, we just like to go by each class, seeing what type of people are in each class. Cause I know sometimes during the year, I'm like, oh, I've heard this name a couple times. Is he a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, a senior? How long do we have him? So we like to do it that way. It makes it a little more organized. But for our football, let's start with football first. There is not a large junior class for football. I think that's more of a good thing, to be honest, because it'll be
for time's sake.
Yeah, great. Exactly. Yeah, for time's sake now. But we talked about football being a young team last year and everything, and hopefully their young team can start to get a little older. But there's really only a little over a dozen juniors, even including a lot of those red shirts that are on the team. But let's start out with QB, which we do now have a junior QB. It seems like everyone's really, really young, and Peyton Ramsey is now a redshirt junior. So we could have a whole discussion on QB, which everyone on every football podcast, every football media outlet, everyone is done talking about the QB. So honestly, there's a lot to talk about, but there's not much to talk about because we could speculate everything. We could talk about the 3 QBs that are going to go into continue summer workouts and go into the very first game against Ball State. But do you have any? But I don't think we need to spend very much time on him. What are your thoughts on just Peyton Ramsey and what he can contribute this year specifically?
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I do believe he'll be the starter day one, just because of his experience. I think this team's ceiling is much higher if he's not the starting quarterback by game 6 of the season. So that is all I'm going to say. I expect him to help us win the first 3 games, which we better win the first 3 games, because if we don't win the first 3 games, we're in trouble.
As ESPN just came out with an ESPN Plus article, so of course you couldn't see it, but it was no secret that if you saw anywhere on Twitter, the ESPN came out with the easiest non-conference schedule out of the entire country, and the Hoosiers were ranked second easiest out of everyone. And when when IU football makes national media for something, it's probably yeah. So
yeah.
They're the second easiest non-conference schedule. So we'll eventually go into we'll make our predictions on who we think is going to win and how the actual football season is going to go. But like you said, yes, they should win those non-conference games.
Yeah, and his experience is going to be key in making sure that we don't throw away those conference games. By throw, I mean throw a billion interceptions, because we know Peyton doesn't throw interceptions or completed passes, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm just kidding. I swear to God, I'm kidding. No, I'm really excited for Peyton Ramsey to be the quarterback. Hopefully he develops a little bit, takes a couple more chances, because I would really like to see the ball move down the field this year.
Yeah. So. Again, like we talked about last year, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts at the beginning of the year. Wait to see how some of the other 2 QBs start to develop, especially knowing how late Jack Tuttle went in, the injuries with Penix coming in. I think it's honestly fair to say that, and it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say Peyton Ramsey's going to start day 1, just due to how late Tuttle came in, the injuries of Penix. I think I'd honestly feel pretty confident even putting money down on that if I were to do that, for having Ramsey start at the beginning. But like we talked about last year and what we assumed last year, I think it's going to be more of the same. Peyton Ramsey starting, then seeing hopefully if Tuttle and Penix can start to come up. And I don't think necessarily Ramsey's going to lose the job because of the stuff he does poorly. I hope it's just because Penix and or Tuttle just are doing better and that much better. And as Coach is saying on the chat, great backup for a Big Ten East program. I agree 100%. Great backup. If someone were to come injured, I wouldn't. A lot of times you come in, you're worried when your backup, when your starter gets injured and your backup comes in, you're so worried about how that backup's going to do. Obviously, it's not your starter, but I wouldn't feel too terrible having Peyton Ramsey come in off of the bench as a backup role.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So let's move on to running back, which there is one junior running back, even though most of the starters will be those freshmen and sophomores. The running back this year that is a junior, well, the one that might see playing time is Cole Guest.
Yeah.
The lineup, the depth chart for running back is so deep. I think Cole Guest is only going to see, which he's had snaps before. That's the good thing. He's not someone that's seen the field 0 times. It's just that we've had a lot of young running backs come in like Stevie Scott and just show out much more than we ever thought. So I think Cole Guest is pretty far down on the depth chart as of now, especially getting in those recruits that we have too. But he's come in and spelled people from time to time. So I wouldn't be surprised seeing on the field for a play or two every here or there.
No, I think I think our running back position has great depth, and that's fantastic, because Lord knows how many injuries we had last year. So we could definitely use the depth. I'm of course really excited to see Stevie Scott and some of the freshmen that are coming in, but also see Cole Guest back from injury, because he got injured last year.
Yep. And Cole Guest even being 4th, if not 5th on the depth chart, I think that also goes to show how deep this running back roster is, and that we're not going to be struggling to try and find running backs this year, trying to find yards and just anything to do with running back. So even if some of those younger players go through spells, I wouldn't be too sad if Cole Guest had to come in for a few plays, as he's already done. Let's go on to wide receiver. Two wide receivers that aren't the top of the list, the two wide receivers that you guys talked about for the senior class, but these are two guys that are going to contribute big time and kind of probably going to make or break some of these games for IU is Whop Phillier and Ty Freifogel.
Yeah, they're key players for us next year. Of course, we all know about, and we'll probably talk about, we have talked about Donovan Hale, Nick Westbrook. Look, those guys are instrumental in our season, but who is going to fill in that third wide receiver role behind them? Whop Phillier last year had a couple bright spots. And personally, I love the way he plays. I like his game. If I was a quarterback, I'd love throwing to him. Wop's my favorite, but I thought Ty Freifogel came in at 6'2" as a big wide receiver, came in and showed a lot of promise as well. So the better of the two of them is going to get that third starting spot on wide receiver. And in DeBoer's new offense, who knows? Maybe that they're both going to see almost equal playing time. So I do think that they've got something to prove going into their senior years. And I'm just really excited to see them play this year. I think the wide receiver position, along with our running back, like I feel like this team has a weird amount of depth in all the skill positions when normally it's been like clear cut, like here's these three guys that are going to start. And then one of them goes down and it's like, let's just plug and play like 5 players to see who actually fills this in. I feel like we have excellent depth at the wide receiver position, excellent depth at the running back position, and excellent depth at the quarterback position. So that's the really good thing about this team.
Yeah. Like especially for depth, like you just talked about, we haven't even gone over the young receivers that started to come into play last year as freshmen or some of the incoming freshmen this year that we have gotten some pretty promising recruits and young players at the wide receiver spot. But yeah, I like Whop Phillier. I liked a lot of what Ty Freifogel did. I think those two are going to make names for themselves, especially when you've got Donovan Hale and Nick Westbrook on the field together. If they're on the same side or opposite sides, those are two guys that defenses. Well, Nick Westbrook and Donovan Hale will draw all of the attention, so that leaves open Whop and Ty to try and get some of those bigger plays. And if we can find a quarterback that can find them and get them the ball, then they're going to be able to make a lot of big plays this year. Both of them had a few big plays this past year, but I think the sky's going to be the limit more, especially as Nick and Donovan are going to be able to play together again.
Yeah, in DeBoer's offense, I really like Whop Phillier at that third wide receiver spot. I don't know what it is exactly. I'll have to watch a little bit more film to give you an exact answer, but I just have this sneaky suspicion that he's going to kill it this year at wide receiver. And whoever's playing quarterback is going to love throwing the ball to him. So,
now for a position that does not have as much depth as you talked about, the offensive line. Got Harry Kreider, who's going to be a guy that's going to start, and then we've got Mackenzie Norwood, that's a guy that's going to be a backup. We've talked about the O-line some. We'll talk about them a little more. We've talked about how they have been a pretty decent offensive line, but they're going to take some hits this year. What are your thoughts on Harry and Mackenzie?
I like that Harry's starting as a junior, getting some experience for probably what will be a much more important role as a senior. But I mean, that's about it. There's not much you can say about this offensive line other than I hope that the starters don't start to get injured because this season could go downhill south very fast. Like it could go from, we could get what Crimson Corey was talking about today, 9 wins, or we could get 3. And it is all based on our offensive line and the health of our offensive line. So
I like your health point because the offensive line is definitely not, like everyone knows, is definitely not a strong point of this team. But I'm not worried about them to the point that it's going to make or break this team in a humongous way with their starters. Your depth point is correct, because if we have to start going into our bench players too much, outside of your normal rest this guy for this play, this guy's banged up for 1 week kind of thing. If we have to go too much into our bench, which happens a lot with offensive line, then it starts to become a problem, especially when we have quarterbacks that are learning to grow and try and get better. So Harry, I think, is going to do good in terms of these two players. McKenzie, he's had some up and downs recently. I think he's solidified himself as a backup and a pretty solid backup, but I think if he continues his development, he's going to be one of the quote unquote sixth men, like one of those guys to as offensive linemen do. So that some of those bench players aren't really like a tackle or a center or a guard. They just kind of play whoever is injured. I think he's going to be able to keep making a name for himself, but
that's what
good.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, he's gonna be like our sixth or seventh man off the bench. We were talking about basketball, right? Like he's gonna be that reliable backup. But the problem is, if we get to the eighth guy or the ninth guy off the bench, God forbid, we're in serious trouble with this team.
Yeah,
just from a lack of experience standpoint, and just they need more time.
Exactly.
So,
that's what I was gonna say, because we've got some Allen's starting to get some of those younger players as offensive linemen. He sees that there's going to be a need for that, but they're young right now, and especially there's a reason why college athletes are made to stay for that many years is because they need to physically grow into and put on weight and put on muscle and stuff. Those younger players need to have time to do that and get experience for the college game that's 5 times faster than high school. They need that time, just like you said. So hopefully some of those guys aren't thrusted into a role too early.
Yep.
On the other side of the line, defensive line, got Jerome Johnson, Michael Ziemba. Same kind of role, I guess, Harry and McKenzie are going to do. Jerome is going to have is going to be in there. He's a guy that you haven't heard about more or not recently. He's probably going to start. Probably. Again, we haven't gone through a lot of training camp stuff, and the defensive line has been a problem last year and this year. When a few years ago it was pretty decent, but again, I'd be more comfortable if Jerome were like that backup player, and Michael were maybe more of that third string, but that's what we have. It's going to be more of the line having the biggest question mark, because once we get into the secondary, it's going to be the same thing like skill positions. But what are your thoughts on having Jerome and Michael as our two defensive line juniors?
Yeah, I think you just stole words out of my mouth. It's kind of like a toss-up. And yeah, we're going to have to hear a lot more out of training camp to know who's going to start on the defensive line. Just because it was so weird last year. At times I thought they were like, oh, okay, maybe this defensive line, is pretty decent. And then other times it was like, holy crap, do we have players playing defensive line? Are they there?
How many games did we were like, are we going to ever get a sack against the opposing quarterback?
Right. I was way more confident in our secondary than I was in our defensive line, and it's not even close. Like, I felt like our linebackers were almost a better defensive line than our defensive line was last year at points. And then there was other games where I was like, oh, we have a defensive line. This is great. I like this. I like getting pressure on the quarterback. So hopefully this year they show up and we get some players that maybe come out of training camp better, bigger, stronger, use that weight room of ours to bulk up and get into Big Ten shape. So
yeah. So long story short, question mark, and we'll see how some of these two guys develop over training camp. Well, really not just these two guys, but the whole line, like we talked about. So
I just talked a lot for what would have been a very simple answer.
Exactly. That's okay. That's what a podcast is for.
That's all right. True.
There are no linebacker juniors, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but let's move on to the secondary, which is going to be very exciting. I loved Coach's comment earlier. He said, come on, guys, you guys are getting me excited about football. I'm trying to ease into the season with some mild expectations. So your offensive skill positions were excitement. Your line was mild expectations. Secondary, excitement. Because when you have juniors, not even seniors yet, with Marcelino Ball and Andre Brown Jr., let alone having Raheem Lane coming off of the bench. We talked about secondary last year, and I think it was kind of like Romeo expectations this year. Everyone expected like almost maybe too much. People expected a lot from the secondary last year, and they were upset when the secondary didn't produce as much as they wanted to. But remember, the secondary has not lost almost any people. It was young 2 years ago. It was young last year, and they're starting to get even just more developed and experienced this year. And having Marcelino and Andre Brown here in the secondary is, I think you're going to say more of the same stuff. Again, it's a bad podcast for disagreeing, but I'm just super excited to see, especially those two players.
Yeah, I love Marcelino Ball. I love Marcelino Ball as a player. Andre Brown's great as well. So don't let me not talk about him. But God, Marcelino Ball is going to be so much fun to watch. This defensive secondary is going to be great, and we might have the best secondary in the league this year. And these guys are juniors, right? And they're going to stick around. So I'm excited for this year, but I'm really excited for next year for this defense. Another year of experience in this defensive belt. God, it's weird having bright expectations and bright thoughts about IU football. For like the first time in 4 years, I can go, we might have one of the best defenses in the country next year.
Let's pause the brakes just a little bit.
I'm just saying, from a depth standpoint and from an experience standpoint, our defense is going to look like a defense that IU has not seen in a very long time, if ever. So what Tom Allen has done, what Coach Allen has done with this defense is remarkable. Especially somebody who had to experience that 2015 defense and got to watch the 2013 and 2014 defenses. The quick turnaround is now 2019, and we're talking about possibly having – okay, I'm talking about possibly having one of the better defenses in the country. There's not a lot of other people talking about it. I'm just saying I'm hyping this up, and I'm talking a lot. So I'm going to shut up and say I'm really excited for this year. Marcelino Ball is going to be a beast. You know, again, with everything in football, if they stay healthy, this is going to be a fantastic year for the secondary.
I'll temper your expectations just a little bit, and say maybe one of the better defenses in the league, which, again, if you're one of the better defenses is in the East, in the Big Ten, that's still pretty good compared to where IU usually is. But you were talking about depth because remember last week we talked about, or not last week, the last senior class episode we talked about Ashawn Riggins, Khalil Bryant, and then you've got Bryant Fitzgerald coming up as a sophomore. Mm-hmm. That's 5 players, let alone Raheem Lane as a great backup guy that's still learning. Even though he's a junior, he's still a guy that's kind of developing a little late. Nothing but good stuff about the secondary. Maybe Tom Allen giving up the defensive coordinator position is also going to help, that he can relinquish some of that, but still have the feel of him jumping whatever IU's defense up like 50 spots or whatever it felt like from him coming into IU as the defensive coordinator. This is finally these are still not all his players, even as the defensive coordinator, but we're finally starting to see some of the players and some of the development that he's been able to do over his tenure at IU between defensive coordinator and head coach. Mm-hmm. So be excited for the secondary. Very exciting for the secondary. Even this is, like you said, I think there's someone that the whole league is going to have to look at instead of like you look at, IU or Ohio State has like these quarterbacks or whatever. It's like the people are going to start looking at the IU secondary, which the only part that I would pump the brakes on is if the offense can do their job and stay on the field. The IU defense, as any defense in any football team ever, if the offense is on the field for like 2 minutes and then the defense plays the whole time, they get tired, you make a lot of mistakes. So that's the only part that hopefully the offense does their job so that the defense isn't on the field too much, and then they start losing wind, which is what you see when Indiana is beating Ohio State and then gets blown out in the last quarter. It's because they have more depth and they can play for longer.
Yes.
All right, special teams, very quick. Jared Smoller, kickoff guy.
Yep, kickoff guy. Check.
Kickoff guy, check. Did an okay job. I mean, there's not much to say about that. Jacob Limbach, long snapper. That is an important position.
Yes.
That is an important position. You still have to snap the ball to the specific spot being that far away. It is a position that even in the NFL, they talk about and look over longer than you might think. Jacob Limbach, still an offensive line guy. Not great, not bad, good.
Yeah, fine.
Okay. All right, let's move on to basketball. We could talk about who won the week. I think Romeo won the week, getting into the lottery, the end of it.
Yeah.
We've already talked about him. I think that's the biggest point with all of the little news. You could also go to Lily King and Andrew Gutman winning the IU Athletes of the Year, where Lily King was also the first athlete, not female athlete in general from Indiana that has won that award on 4 occasions. 4 occasions, which is ridiculous. All right, basketball. The 3 juniors that we've got for basketball is Al Durham, Justin Smith, Joey Brunk. And these, of course, as we do all the time, is just officially whether they're redshirted or graduates or whatever. That's just their league, how many years of eligibility they have left. So Al Durham, Justin Smith, Joey Brunk. We went into more depth on them specifically in our in-depth roster episode. So if you want to hear even more analysis from it, go back to that episode if you didn't listen to it. But let's talk about Al Durham a little bit. What do you think Al Durham's impact can be this year?
I think Al could be that rock steady guard that he's been almost his entire career at IU. Just that guy who comes in, gives you great defense at 6'4", size, length, in the pack line, and somebody who Archie Miller trusts to play. And hopefully he improves his shooting a little bit, gets more consistent. We know he's got that greater range of floaters and finishes around the rim that he's known for. If he can become a better all-around offensive player, I think he's going to be a stud on this team. If he doesn't develop like we all expect he will, he'll probably come off the bench and play some good minutes still because he plays great defense and Archie Miller trusts him. So
yeah, especially defense. I think if Al Durham continues to grow as your average player does from year to year, so not necessarily jumping up like Juwan Morgan level from sophomore to junior year, but also just not getting better whatsoever. If he has a normal progression, he's going to be like you. All of those points you said, I echo. I'm going to echo even more the defense, that he's just going to be a solid guy, not someone that's going to be too flashy or too recent terms like Yogi Ferrell maybe, but he's just going to be a solid, and rotation player is a bad word for it, but he's not going to be the star of the team, but he's going to be a guy that really not makes or breaks this team, but it plays a huge role and it's going to have a huge contribution throughout the team basketball, especially with what Archie's going to do.
Yeah, and his role in the locker room is actually really important. I think it's a little bit underrated when you look at the basketball players, but as far as social media presence and being a positive influence, Al is one of those people in the locker room that's always, he's like every video, he's always got a smile on his face, or he's focused, like he's extremely focused on what he's doing. He's got great work ethic. If you follow him on Instagram, he's always posting videos of him getting more shots up. So I like Al a lot, and I'm excited to see him grow and see what he does as a junior.
He's also such a humble guy, and it's always easy to root for the humble guys. And
yes,
so yeah, let's talk about Justin Smith. We could have an episode or 2 on Justin Smith.
Justin, yes, because
his ceiling is one of the best. Honestly, his ceiling is probably close to one of the better players in the entire country, the better players in the entire league. But his floor is also pretty low per se. I was going through because everyone on all media forums has joked, if they're allowed to, has joked about good Troy, bad Troy. Then that was taken up by Devontae Green. Honestly, this year, and it wasn't necessarily play to play like sometimes Troy did, but it was game to game for Justin Smith. How you saw that he was benched for almost the entire game, but then he comes out against one of the best teams in the country at the time, Michigan State, and have one of the games he did. So I think it's just going to be, I don't want to say his attitude, it's up to his attitude, because that's something we can't really judge from the outside. But I think if he, like we talk about with Devontae a lot, if he can start to become a consistent player, he's a guy, and I talked about this on the in-depth roster episode where we talked about who's going to make or break this team. I think my guy was Justin Smith, because he's that guy that can really propel this team forward, because he's really one of our only true 3 wing players. He's going to be one of those guys that can propel us forward or hold us back, because he's going to just take another way, a depth bench, a spot on the bench. Ugh. Since we only have 11 scholarship guys, if he sits on the bench, it just takes away another player that's going to play, and we have to thrust maybe someone like Demezi or Armand that's not ready to play yet.
Yeah, he's an extremely clunky offensive player, and I don't expect him to take this otherworldly jump and be able to shoot, 36% from 3 and be able to put the ball on the floor. But if he can gain some confidence in both those facets and be able to try and at least do that, I think he becomes a much better player and a very important player in this roster, like you talked about, and somebody who the NBA scouts go, holy crap, this guy can jump. This dude is athletic. Like, because Justin, out of everybody on this roster that's left, discount Romeo because he's already gone, but out of the people that are going to be the roster next year, I think he has the best potential for an NBA player. He is a world-class athlete and somebody who you can see could have a jump shot at some point. And if he does, look out, because like I said, you couple that jump shot with a world-class athlete, you get an NBA wing. You get somebody who's 3 and D. His defense, he's probably the best defender on the team. He can switch. He can guard multiple positions. That's somebody that something you look for in the NBA. Switchable defenders. And in the pack line, he is an absolute nuisance. So if he can just be a confident offensive player, because at times, and during the Michigan State game, he looked confident. He looked like he wanted to get the ball. He looked like he knew exactly what he was going to do with it. And then you go and you watch games like when we lost to Rutgers this year, he did not look confident with the ball, and Archie had to, take him aside and go, "What are you doing here? Why are you trying to dribble the ball out when you can just pass it around and get somebody a better shot?" So Justin, I think just at times overthinks things, and you can kind of see it like going through his head. At times on the court, if he can become a much more confident player and be like, yeah, this is what I need to do, and I can see it, and this is like, I'm not going to think about it, I'm just going to go do it, I think he's going to be a much better player on both ends of the floor. But I think defense is obviously his strong suit.
Yeah, exactly. And you said best NBA potential. You even put that above Trace Jackson Davis.
Yeah. Switchable wing that can shoot. Like, God, you tell that to any NBA scout, and they like start salivating in their mouth. They're like, holy crap, Klay Thompson. No, not Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
but like, like players like that can sit there and shoot off the wing, like a Trevor Ariza or something like that, is just like scouts love that. So as far as NBA potential goes, I think, especially with his athleticism, Justin is up there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially when the IU basketball team, the social media account put out that video today of just Justin flying, basically.
I didn't see that yet. I have to go check that out.
It's a whole minute of Justin basically flying above the rim, more or less, of showing off his athleticism. So just proves your point even more.
God, I wish I had half of his jumping ability.
Yeah. Maybe even a quarter of his jumping ability.
Right.
All right, our last player that we're going to talk about this evening is Joey Brunk. That I think most people are very, very excited about. Again, we have to see it on the court, but from what we've seen, as much as we can see over the summer, it's like the joke that everyone talks about with the NFL when they go in their pre-draft workouts and everything, just NFL in shorts, because it's not anything the same. It's almost the same with Joey, like just looking at him on Twitter and his media comments and his like highlight reels and stuff. As much as you can, he's doing all the right stuff so far. Like we talked about with Archie before he started coaching, he is just doing all the right stuff so far. And I think he seems like just a great kid. He seems like a guy that you'd love to have on his team. And first of all, that's great because he's an Indiana guy. You love the attitude. You love the heart. That's almost sometimes half of the battle for some players. So that part's been great. And if he can show out and put out a lot of what his specific basketball skills that we've been able to see touches on, and if he can even give us 7, 8, 9, 10 solid minutes a game, he's a guy that's going to be really special to the rotation of this team.
Yeah, what you just said at last is my favorite point about the Joey Brunk transfer. Because people are like, why do we need him? It's like, why not? He's a 6'10" guy. He's from in-state, played at Butler, which is a great program. I got serious minutes at Butler and played some minutes against really good competition in the Big East. That is somebody who legitimately is if he's your third center off the bench, like you got some good centers. Like you got great minutes going around and being able to bring off a fresh Big East, hardened center as your third guy, like that's not something many programs can say. Like that's the likes of Kentucky, right? Like when Kentucky brings their third center off the bench, he's usually better than, most of the centers they play. But like IU, it's like our third center off the bench last year was who? Jake Forrester? Clifton Moore?
Sometimes Juwan Morgan just shifting down.
Right. Like a extremely tired and needs an oxygen mask, Juwan Morgan as he put a mask on. He put like one of those glasses with the mustache on and came back in as a different player. No. So the depth at the center position this year is going to be great. And it's going to afford somebody like Trace Jackson Davis the ability to go through those freshman growing pains. Because God forbid he gets in foul trouble, right? One night. He comes in, he plays, he picks up 2 quick fouls. The ability to put somebody in like Joey Brunk to still give somebody like Deron Davis the rest he needs to go in and play at his best in the fourth quarter. Late in the second half, or what might as well be the fourth quarter, but late in the second half, Joey Brunk is going to be instrumental in that. And we're going to see a lot better inside scoring presence later in the second half now, thanks to the depth that we have. Joey's going to do that for us. Now, how much playing time does he get depends on, again, we all know this, how much trust Archie Miller has in his ability on the defensive end. We've seen some tape of him from Butler. We played against him last year. I thought he played a pretty good game against us last year when we played them in Banker's Life. But, at times I've watched Butler play and I've gone, he's a little suspect on the defensive end. He has some lapses. Again, he's a sophomore college player. That happens. But, maybe under Archie Miller's tutelage and under the coaching staff, they get him to become a much better defensive player and a much better rebounder. Because for a guy his size, he doesn't get the greatest amount of rebounds. And that's going to be something that, but maybe pairing him with somebody like Race Thompson might help him out because Race Thompson's a great rebounder. So you never know. But this roster is so weird. I feel like it's the same thing. Well, I feel like football, at least we know, it's like, okay, it's between these 3 players. And that might kind of mean something in football, but like 3 players, like, everybody's going to get minutes. But in basketball, it's like, it's between these 7 players who's going to get like the extra playing time. It's like, I could tell you what the lineups are going to be. It's just guessing at this point.
As we did for an entire episode, basically.
That's right. Go check it out.
For Joey, this is the one downside that I would be concerned about for him if he has to start. If he has to start at the beginning of the season. Now, if he earns the starting role, that's just more power to him. I think that just says worlds about what he's been doing on the court specifically, because if he can supersede Deron, people like Deron Davis with
and Trace.
Yeah. So if he can supersede that because of the stuff he's earned, then that is amazing. I'd rather have that. But if he is required to start due to injury or something else, then I'm not sure just him immediately being thrust into a Big Ten role as a starter. Because like you talked about with Butler, he didn't necessarily, and again, Butler doesn't play obviously doesn't play some of the caliber teams IU plays, at least on a consistent basis. So if he wasn't putting out at least as much as he could have been, then him starting immediately might be a concern. But there have been vibes, as coaches talked about recently, that he could potentially be starting anyway, which if he's earned that, again, I'd love that. That'd be amazing.
I would love that as well. But I just don't see that. I feel like Duran and Trace are just better players than him at this point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is okay. Honestly, I'd love to see Joey Brunk come off as a consistent big role player from the bench. I think he's going to be one of those players that could potentially thrive on a bench spot. It was like Devontae last year, not this past year, but the year before that, how we saw when he was able to come off the bench, even sometimes this year, he almost did better because he could just wait. It's like those things coming off the bench, how the six man has an advantage at some point, so they can take in the game, soak in the game, and then see what kind of stuff they have to do. As we also wait, because remember, Joey's brand new to the program. Yeah, he has a lot of experience, but he's got to try and, like you said, get adjusted to the pack line defense specifically and see what he can do. So beginning of the season, hope he doesn't have to start starting. If he does because he earned it, amazing. If he does by the end of the season, I think still great, because he's showing that he can actually, not actually, but that he can produce and do a lot of great things on the court. So a guy to follow, and it's going to be a real interesting story throughout the entire year. And again, everything we said, he's the kind of player that everything we said could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
In a good way or a bad way, both ways. So
right. Yeah, and I'm saying there's no way he's going to start, and then he goes out and is averaging, like, God forbid, like 10 points a game, like starting. Oh God, I love that. Please. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And
again, I could also see him spotting Duran more minutes than we might want at the beginning of the year, as Duran officially tries to get 100%. So we'll have to see what kind of stuff Joey gives. But that's been a long episode. So that about wraps it up for our 94th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Big thanks to our live audience and coach for coming out and participating in that chat. Make sure to stay tuned through updates on Twitter. Visit our website, indianahq.com. Subscribe so you can get all those episodes right to your phone. If you have not listened to last week's show and you're listening still to the very end of this podcast, please listen to the Branch McCracken, the Bill Murphy podcast about Branch McCracken. I know some people, it's like, oh, it's especially young guys like us. We're like, oh, it's okay. We don't really have to know a lot about Branch McCracken. There are so many cool stories that Bill Murphy gives. It is well worth a listen. And if you haven't listened to it yet, man, it's just going to be I think it's a 45 minute episode. It's not too long. You're just going to be smiling, laughing, listening to all the great insight he gives. Go listen to that episode. Listen to it again. I'm probably going to listen to it again just with all the great insight he gave. But send us your questions of the audience on what questions you have so we can get them on our next episode. And most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is how we grow this podcast so we can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.